Begin. The dust of redemption, an 1880s cattle town, was a part of Alara, settling into the creases of her apron and the flour on her hands. She wasn't just a cook. She was the heart of the Golden Spur Saloon's kitchen, a place where sizzling bacon and the scent of baking bread mixed with the low hum of gossip. Alara was known for two things: her meat pies, with their flaky, golden crust that practically melted in your mouth, and her sharp, knowing eyes that missed nothing. Every day, as the sun climbed high, Alara would be there, sleeves rolled up, kneading dough with strong, capable hands. Her fingers, often stained with grease and flour, moved with practiced ease. The kitchen was a world of its own, filled with the clatter of pots and pans, the hiss of frying meat, and the rich smell of spices. But it was also a place where secrets, whispered over morning coffee or shouted over a round of drinks, drifted in through the swinging doors. Alara heard it all: who owed money, who was sweet on whom, and most importantly, who was up to no good. She'd seen many things in redemption, good and bad. Her kindness was as well known as her toughness. If a cowboy was down on his luck, she'd slip him an extra slice of pie. If someone was causing trouble, she'd fix them with a look that could curdle milk. She watched the town, observed its people, and silently collected pieces of information, like scattered beads on a string. She knew the rhythm of the town, from the first lonely whistle of the morning train to the last raucous laugh from the saloon. She knew Sheriff Brody was too fancy for his boots, and his deputies, always lurking, seemed more interested in lining their pockets than keeping the peace. Alara just kept baking, her hands busy, her mind always a step ahead. And begin. One sweltering afternoon, after the last lunch plate was cleared and the saloon was quiet, Alara was scrubbing down the big butcher block. It was old, scarred with years of knife marks, and had a loose knot on one side. As she scrubbed a little too hard, the knot popped out, revealing a small, dark hollow within the wood. Curiosity, a trait as sharp as her best carving knife, made her reach inside. Her fingers brushed against something stiff, cold, and not meant to be there. She pulled it out. It was a small, leather-bound book, thin but heavy in her hand. A ledger. Dust motes danced in the lone shaft of sunlight filtering through the kitchen window as she carefully opened it. The pages were filled with neat, cramped handwriting, column after column of numbers, dates, and names. Her brow furrowed as she read. This wasn't just any ledger. It was Sheriff Brody's personal record. And it wasn't about cattle sales or saloon profits. As she turned the pages, her heart began to thump like a drum in her chest. This ledger showed money being taken from the town's funds, from taxes meant for roads and schools, from fees paid by honest ranchers. It was clear as day. Sheriff Brody, the man who swore to protect redemption, was stealing from it, right under everyone's noses. Names of his deputies, familiar faces, were also in the margins, linked to the crooked deals. A cold dread spread through Alara. She held proof of Brody's corruption, a secret that could bring him down. But it also meant she was in grave danger. If Brody, or any of his men, found out she had this ledger, her life wouldn't be worth the dust under her worn boots. Her kitchen, usually a sanctuary of warmth and good smells, suddenly felt like a trap. The ink on the pages seemed to glow with a dangerous light. And begin. Alara clutched the ledger, her mind racing. The quiet of the kitchen was suddenly broken by the heavy thud of boots on the saloon floor, growing louder, closer. Sheriff's orders, a gruff voice boomed. Search every corner. Her blood ran cold. They were looking for the ledger. Brody must have realized it was missing. Panic flared, but Alara pushed it down, her years of frontier living teaching her to act, not freeze. She glanced around the kitchen. Where could she hide it? The flour bin? Too obvious. Under a loose floorboard? Not enough time. Then her gaze fell upon the row of freshly baked meat pies cooling on the wooden rack. Their golden crusts, still warm from the oven, seemed to wink at her. An idea, wild and daring, sparked in her mind. She quickly pulled the ledger apart, tearing out the crucial pages, careful not to rip the important numbers and names. The ink, though dry, still felt slick under her trembling fingers. Working fast, she picked up a pie, its buttery aroma filling her nostrils. With a small, sharp knife, she carefully lifted a section of the top crust, revealing the rich, savory meat filling beneath. She folded a page of the ledger small, pushing it deep into the hot, moist filling, then gently pressed the crust back down, smoothing it over as if nothing had happened. The warmth of the pie seeped into her hands. One by one, she tucked the incriminating pages into different pies. Her fingers worked with frantic speed, a fine sheen of sweat breaking out on her brow. Each pie became a small, delicious secret keeper. Just as she finished with the last one, the kitchen door swung open with a bang. Two burly deputies, their eyes narrowed, stomped in, their boots tracking dust across her clean floor. "And begin." The two deputies filled the kitchen doorway, their eyes scanning the room. Alara stood by the cooling rack, her hands still coated with pie grease and bits of crust, her heart hammering against her ribs like a runaway train. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to keep her face a mask of calm, tired neutrality. The aroma of baked pies, usually so comforting, now seemed to hang heavy in the air, a silent accomplice to her daring act. "What do you want?" Alara asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her stomach. She wiped her hands slowly on her apron, making sure to smear the grease and flour, making them look busy and innocent. "Sheriff's orders," Alara, grunted Deputy Jenkins, his gaze lingering on the pies. "Looking for something? Anything out of place?" Alara shook her head. "Just cooking, same as always. Unless you think my meat pies are out of place?" She managed a small, tired smile, hoping it looked convincing. Her gaze flickered to the pies, each one a ticking time bomb of truth. The ink from the ledger pages would be soaking into the rich meat and gravy, the buttered crusts sealing them in. The other deputy, a younger, jumpier man named Miller, started to rummage through the dry stores, knocking over a sack of flour. Alara watched him, her eyes sharp, ready to react if they got too close to her precious cargo. Every rustle, every clank of a pot, made her jump inside. She could feel the pulse throbbing in her neck. Her fingers, still slightly greasy, clenched and unclenched. The air in the kitchen felt thick, charged with unspoken danger. She just needed them to leave. Just needed them to leave before one of them decided a warm pie looked too tempting. "And begin." The deputies finally left, grumbling about dead ends and empty leads. Alara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her kitchen, once again, felt safe, though the memory of their searching eyes lingered like stale smoke. She looked at the pies, now cool enough to handle, their golden crust still perfect. These weren't just pies anymore. They were vessels of truth, carrying a dangerous secret. Soon, a young delivery boy from the livery stable arrived, ready to collect the day's special order. Today's order was for the brand new railway line, for the fancy dining car that served important folks traveling across the plains. Alara carefully placed the pies into sturdy wooden crates, her fingers brushing against the still warm crusts, feeling the slight give where the ledger pages lay hidden. Each pie was wrapped in a clean cloth, a small, innocent package concealing a mighty punch. She watched as the boy loaded the crates onto a small, dusty wagon. The wagon rattled away from the saloon, heading towards the edge of town where the gleaming rails of the new railroad stretched into the distance. Alara stood in the doorway, a wisp of flour on her cheek, watching until the wagon was just a speck against the vast western sky. A thin plume of smoke rose from the distant horizon, a sign that the afternoon train was approaching. Its whistle, a mournful cry cutting through the quiet air, sounded closer than usual. She imagined the pies, bouncing gently in their crates, nearing their destination. Her plan was a gamble, a desperate throw of the dice. She didn't know if it would work or what would happen if it did. All she knew was that those pies, baked with butter and courage, were now carrying the weight of redemption's future. She could only hope that somewhere down the line, someone important would get a taste of justice. "And begin." The clackety-clack of the train wheels provided a rhythmic backdrop to the elegant dining car. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off polished silverware and crystal glasses. Unlike the dusty saloon in Redemption, this car was a picture of refined comfort. White-gloved waiters moved smoothly between tables, serving up fine meals to a collection of important-looking passengers. Among them sat Mr. Davies, a keen-eyed newspaper reporter from the city, always on the hunt for a good story. He dabbed his mouth with a crisp napkin, finishing his roast beef. "And for dessert, gentlemen," announced a waiter with a flourish, "we have fresh meat pies, delivered specially from the town of Redemption. A local delicacy, I'm told." Mr. Davies raised an eyebrow. Meat pie for dessert? An interesting choice. But his curiosity was piqued. He watched as a warm, gold-encrusted pie was placed before him. Its buttery aroma filled the air, a familiar, comforting smell that seemed out of place in such a grand setting. Other passengers, a banker, a land speculator, and a traveling politician, also received their pies. They chatted idly, unaware of the explosive secret nestled within their savory treats. Mr. Davies picked up his fork, admiring the perfectly crimped edge of the crust. He cut into the pie, the flaky pastry yielding with a soft sigh. Steam rose, carrying the rich scent of cooked meat and spices. He took a bite, savoring the taste. It was truly excellent, far better than any saloon pie he'd encountered. As he went for a second helping, his fork scraped against something firm, something that wasn't meat or pastry. He looked down, and, begin. Mr. Davies peered into his pie. What he saw wasn't more meat, but a strange, damp piece of paper, stained dark with gravy and ink. He carefully fished it out with his fork, holding it up to the light. It was clearly a page from a book, with precise lines and numbers, though some were blurred by the pie's filling. He laid it flat on his napkin, curious. "Is something wrong, sir?" the waiter asked, hovering politely. "No, no," Mr. Davies replied, his reporter's instincts tingling. "Just an unusual ingredient." He picked at another part of the pie and found a second piece of paper, then a third. Each was a page from a ledger, filled with careful writing. As he wiped the gravy from one, he could make out Sheriff Brody, and then town funds followed by large, subtracted numbers. His eyes widened. This was no ordinary paper. This was evidence. The banker across from him, noticing Mr. Davies's sudden intensity, leaned over. "Found a prize in your pie, Mr. Davies?" "Indeed," Mr. Davies said, his voice low and serious. "It appears I've found a story." He looked around the dining car. Other passengers were cutting into their own pies. He wondered if they, too, would find similar surprises. He quickly checked his fellow diners' plates. A gasp from the land speculator, followed by a quiet exclamation, confirmed his suspicion. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Mr. Davies announced, pushing his chair back. "I need to speak with the conductor." Immediately, he carefully folded the gravy-stained pages and tucked them into his breast pocket. His mind was already racing, piecing together the implications of this strange delivery. Someone, he realized, had deliberately hidden these papers, and they wanted them found. And, begin. The moment Mr. Davies presented the gravy-stained ledger pages to the conductor, a buzz went through the dining car. Passengers, initially enjoying their meals, now exchanged excited whispers. The banker, the land speculator, and even the politician, who had also found similar evidence in their own pies, gathered around. This was more than just a scandal. It was a story cooked right into their supper. Mr. Davies, with his reporter's sharp mind, quickly interviewed everyone who had found a piece of the ledger. He scribbled notes furiously, his pen scratching against his pad, capturing every detail, every shocked reaction. He promised them that by the next morning, the whole territory would know. True to his word, as soon as the train pulled into the next major station, Mr. Davies sprang into action. He found the local telegraph office, a small, bustling room filled with the rhythmic click-clack of Morse code. He quickly wrote out his dispatch, describing the unusual discovery in the meat pies and detailing the corruption exposed in Sheriff Brody's ledger. The telegraph operator, wide-eyed, began tapping out the message, sending it flying across the wires to newspapers in every major town and city. Within hours, the story was printed. Headlines screamed, "Corruption baked in a pie," "Frontier Sheriff exposed," and "Meat pies reveal secret ledger." People read the astonishing news over their breakfast coffee, their eyes wide with disbelief and anger. The story spread like wildfire, carried by the telegraph, by word of mouth, and by new passengers boarding trains along the line. Soon, every saloon, every general store, every dusty street corner from Denver to Dodge City was buzzing with the tale of the incriminating pies and the corrupt Sheriff Brody. The quiet courage of a cook was about to shake a whole territory. And begin. Back in Redemption, the morning sun brought not comfort, but a cold, creeping dread to Sheriff Brody. He sat in his office, a half-eaten breakfast forgotten on his desk, staring at the newspaper brought in by a nervous deputy. The headline, stark and bold, screamed "Corruption baked in a pie." Below it, a detailed account of his stolen ledger pages, complete with names and numbers, was laid bare. "Ow!" Brody roared, slamming his fist on the desk. Ink bottles jumped. "How did this get out?" Deputy Jenkins, pale and fidgeting, stammered, "It says here, meat pies, Sheriff." On the train, Brody's face, usually smug, twisted into a mask of pure panic. Meat pies. Alara's pies. He remembered searching the saloon, remembered his deputies rummaging through her kitchen. He hadn't thought to check the food itself. The clever, quiet cook had outsmarted him. The other deputies, summoned to the office, clustered around the damning newspaper. Their faces mirrored Brody's fear. Their names, too, were in those blurred, gravy-stained columns. The easy money, the sense of untouchable power, vanished like smoke. "We have to do something," Deputy Miller squeaked, his eyes darting nervously towards the window. "People are already talking. I saw them in the street, pointing." A low murmur of anger was indeed beginning to rise from the town. It wasn't just whispers anymore. The news, carried by the morning train and the telegraph wires, had reached Redemption. The townspeople, who had long suspected something was amiss but lacked proof, now had it, served up in a most unexpected fashion. Brody paced his office like a trapped animal, his boots scuffing the floorboards. His secret was out, and the reckoning was coming. The very pies he dismissed as simple food were now his downfall. And begin. The anger in Redemption was a slow burn at first, like embers catching fire. Then it flared into a roaring blaze. People gathered in small groups, clutching the newspapers that had arrived on the morning train, their faces grim. The names in the ledger were familiar. Their neighbors, their friends, even their own families, who had paid taxes and fees that were supposed to build a better town, only to have them stolen by the very men sworn to protect them. "My boy's school money gone," cried Mrs. Gable, her voice cracking. "And the new well for the livestock," added a rancher, his fists clenched. Brody promised. The saloon, usually a place of laughter and card games, now hummed with a different kind of energy. Voices were raised, not in cheer but in outrage. The common folk, the shopkeepers, the cowboys, the farmers, they all felt cheated, lied to. They had known things weren't right, but now they had proof delivered in the most unexpected way. News traveled beyond Redemption, too. In dusty little settlements and bustling rail towns across the plains, people read the story of the meat pies and the corrupt sheriff. They recognized the same kind of crooked dealings in their own towns, the same kind of abuse of power. A wave of shared frustration rippled across the frontier. "We demand justice," shouted a grizzled old prospector, his voice echoing through Redemption's main street. Others took up the cry, "Justice! Justice!" Soon, a crowd began to form, growing larger by the minute, all heading towards the sheriff's office. Their demands were clear. Sheriff Brody and his crooked deputies had to go. The quiet courage of one cook had lit a fuse, and now the whole territory was ready to explode with the force of its indignation. The reckoning had truly begun. And begin. Amidst the rising clamor from the street, Alara remained in her kitchen, a calm eye in the storm. She was kneading dough for tomorrow's bread, her movements steady and sure. The familiar scent of yeast and flour filled the air, a comforting contrast to the angry shouts now echoing from the town square. She heard the rumble of many feet, the rising crescendo of voices demanding answers. Then, cutting through the shouts, came a sound that sent a quiet thrill through her, the long, clear whistle of the afternoon train, pulling into Redemption. It was a different whistle than usual, somehow louder, more triumphant. It wasn't just a signal of arrival. It was a fanfare for change. Alara paused, her hands still in the dough. She imagined the train, pulling in, bringing with it not just passengers and goods, but the truth carried on the wind of Mr. Davies's newspaper reports. She knew, without a doubt, that her pies had reached their mark. The distant shouts, the sudden flurry of activity outside, the sharp, authoritative train whistle, it all confirmed her bold gamble had paid off. A small smile touched her lips, a rare, private moment of triumph. Her heart, which had pounded with fear just yesterday, now swelled with a quiet, deep satisfaction. She hadn't wielded a gun or shouted from a platform. Her weapon had been flour, butter, and a hidden truth baked into something as ordinary as a meat pie. It wasn't a loud, boastful victory, but a silent, profound one. She simply returned to her kneading, the rhythm of her work a testament to the steady, quiet power of courage. The town was finally waking up, and she, the cook, had helped stir them. And begin. The roar from the streets of Redemption grew louder, an unstoppable wave of righteous anger. Sheriff Brody, trembling and pale, tried to barricade himself and his deputies inside the office, but it was useless. The townspeople, joined by ranchers and miners from the surrounding lands, surged forward, their voices a single, powerful demand for justice. The proof was irrefutable, printed in newspapers far and wide, confirmed by the very evidence found in the pies. It wasn't long before the county judge, alerted by the widespread news and the unusual train activity, arrived with a detachment of honest marshals. There was no escaping the truth. Sheriff Brody and his deputies, stripped of their badges, were arrested and led away, their heads bowed in shame. The sight brought a cheer from the crowd, a release of tension that had built for too long. In the days that followed, Redemption began to heal. Honest citizens stepped forward, eager to rebuild trust. A new, fair sheriff was appointed, a man known for his integrity and respect for the law. Town meetings were held, openly discussing how the stolen funds would be recovered and used to truly benefit the community. Schools were planned, roads repaired, and a sense of shared purpose filled the air, replacing the old suspicion and fear. Alara continued to bake her famous meat pies, though now they carried no hidden secrets. Her kitchen remained the heart of the Golden Spur, a place of warmth and good food. Sometimes a customer would wink and ask, "Any special ingredients in these, Alara?" And she would just smile, her eyes twinkling. She was just a cook, but her quiet courage had sparked a revolution. Redemption, once a town held captive by corruption, was now truly living up to its name, thanks to the truth delivered, one delicious bite at a time.